Oh. Satchidanandarupaya Vishwotpattyadihetave Tapatraya Vinashaya Shri Krishnaya Vayam Numaha. Janmadhyasya yatonvayandi taratascharteshvabhignaswarat Tene brahmahridaya adikavaye muhyanti yatsurayaha Tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha Dhamna svena sada nirasta kuhakam satyam param dhimahi Dharma projita kaita votra paramo nirmatsaranam satam Vedyam vastavamatra vastu shivadam tapatrayon mulanam Shrimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim va parerishwaraha Sadyo hridyavarudhyate trakritibihi Shushrushubistatchana. Hari Om, and greetings from Niagara Falls. Often, when we think of the Puranas, what comes to our mind, a Rakshasa is engaged in that which is wrong. Bhagavan comes and destroys this Rakshasa so that all is right. And we enjoy this, seeing Ravana hurting humanity and then Bhagavan Rama coming and destroying him. We enjoy this because it requires no effort from our side. It's like a movie to us. For those who are working to grow out of curiosity into the Puranas and into the courage to live by the Puranas, this is facilitated by effort. Please remember that, to grow out of curiosity and into courage, it demands effort. The original Rakshasa is not Ravana. It is Ahankara, ego. The word Rakshasa means the one we need Raksha from. We need protection from. I need protection from my own ego. And personalizing this, who is Bhagavan? Another name for Bhagavan is Pati. Pati means Papa Nashana. The one who's erasing Papa is a protector, is Bhagavan. Now I'm the one who's facilitating Papa. I have to be the one who erases this Papa. This is the vision of Vedanta and Bhagavata, for us to go from being curious to being courageous with effort. In chapter 84, Sri Vasudeva has come to understand and appreciate he has taken Krishna for granted. This is Krishna, not Bhagavan Krishna. And he's asking the rishis, how can I know Bhagavan Krishna? And they share by yajna. We have a teaching in our culture, yajno ve Vishnu. Yajna is Vishnu. In general, yajna is living a life of arpana. Arpana means being dedicated, offering. This will lead to shuddha. Whatever is blocking me from knowing Bhagavan Krishna, me taking him for granted, that gets cleared, shuddha. And that leads to moksha, where I know Bhagavan Krishna. Specifically, so again, what does yajna mean? Generally, it is a life of arpana, dedication. Specifically, visrajet buddhaha. In this life of dedication, there is also a sacrifice, a letting go. What do the wise renounce? Starting with desire. Our desire for putra has to be quietened by graha. Be one with lots of responsibilities, and you will not have the bandwidth to indulge in this pursuit of pleasure. The second desire, vitta eshana, the desire for possessions. And this can be quietened by dedicating ourselves to dana. Dana means generosity. And then we will let go of this desire. Number 3, each of these is more subtle. Loka eshana, the desire for position. How do I let go of this? It is by remembering kala. The more I understand and appreciate time, the more I see investing in position is futile. This class is very important to me. And so after each class, I listen to the recording to make sure that the Sanskrit, the English, all is of a higher quality. Last week I had shared, I said that the way to end the desire for peace is time. I obviously meant position. Okay, so I shared that wrongly, but I think you all inferred this correctly because you're clear students. So that was about desire. Then what about debt? Specifics are given on how to quieten our debts. Quieten your desires, quieten your debts. The debt to the devas, to nature's forces, through yajna. Be dedicated to yajna. That means living in harmony with nature. If you know the details of how yajnas were facilitated back in the day, it was all earth that they used. All the materials came from earth, they used them, and they went back to earth. There was no sense of plastic and metal. All was earth. They lived in harmony with earth. Our second debt, that is the debt to our pitras, to our family, and that is quietened by putra. It means to care for a younger generation. Okay, it's not about owning a child. It's about caring for a generation. And finally, Rishi Rina, the debt we owe to our guides, Adhyaya, which means to study the Veda, but only in reference to yourself, which really means studying how you can become a better person, using dharma to Brahma. In chapter 85, Shri Vasudeva has these revelations The rishis told him, you're already living a life of yajna. That's why Bhagavan Krishna is born as your son. And he understands and appreciates this. He has these revelations, which I'm going to share with you now. I was not able to last week. He shares to Bhagavan Krishna, you are the agent. And all is expressed as activity. In other words, the notion of doership is wrong, is faulty. It's impossible. He is the doer, not us. Another revelation of Sri Vasudeva is that Bhagavan Krishna is the para. And all is expressed as Vaikari. Para means all of the words that we speak about, the source of that is para or Bhagavan Krishna. Think of this practically. It is awareness, correct? That helps one to know thoughts and words and so on. Another revelation is that Bhagavan Krishna is the senses. And these senses get expressed as the elements. So Vivek's sense of seeing is Bhagavan Krishna. Me seeing all of you, that's an expression of these senses. And that's why one of the names of Bhagavan Krishna is Hrishikesha, the one who's a master of the senses. Another revelation he shares with Bhagavan Krishna, you are relationless. You are relationless. And all of the relationships that express from this, that's the rest. These are just projections. And that's only possible with infinity. He understands and appreciates Bhagavan Krishna as infinity. Infinity doesn't have relationships. He says, you are the Father, and I am the Son. Shri Vasudeva tells Bhagavan Krishna, you're actually the Father, and I'm actually the Son. He said earlier, I felt I was this body, so I'm your father and you're my son. But now I know this to be the opposite. What these revelations are trying to teach us, all of the effects that we're engaged in, whether it's relationships or elements, if it's words, if it's activity, the source, the foundation for all of this is Bhagavan Krishna. And then I read to you a verse where Shri Vasudeva is sharing this with Bhagavan Krishna. I know you are divine. And Bhagavan Krishna says, not just me and my brother and you and those who are living in Dwaraka, but all are divine. All of the humans and animals and plants and stones. In chapter 85, then the shift is to Devi Devaki, and she asks Bhagavan Krishna and Shri Balarama to bring back her murdered children, and he does. And how we can reflect on this, Maya is defined as that which makes the impossible possible. And the only way to deal with Maya is through Kripa. Kripa means grace. Grace also makes the impossible possible. Change and death are very much related to Maya. But there's a way to transcend this, and that is Kripa, Bhagavan's grace. And that's what Bhagavan bringing these children back, his family back, indicates. If we're getting lost in change and death, then earn Bhagavan's Kripa more. In chapter 86, we came to meet Bhagavan's, I guess he was the youngest traditionally, but he actually has a younger sibling, and that is Yoga Maya. And she becomes Subhadra. And we flowed through how she was leaving an Utsava, leaving her palace to go to an utsava, and Prince Arjuna was there, and they got married. And the implication of all of this is that Maya will always be with Maya Pati. Maya will always be with Maya Pati. Yoga Maya, that is Maya or Subhadra, Devi Subhadra, she can only be with Maya Pati. Prince Arjuna is an avatara of Bhagavan Krishna. I'm continuing with the second part of chapter 86 before we continue to the next chapter. So we're still on chapter 86, verse 32. This is Bahulashva, who's speaking to Bhagavan Krishna. Bahulashva is a king. Bhagavan Krishna is meeting him in his kingdom. Swavachastadritam kartum asmadrigocharo bhavan yada teikanta bhaktan me nanta shri raja priyaha. This is a really lovely shloka. What Bahulashva shares with Sri Krishna: you have said, you have taught that the one dearest to you, Priyaha, is the one who loves you exclusively, Ananya, and no other. They are so dear that they are more dear than Anandaha, your brother. Shri, Shrihi, your wife. And Aja, Ajaha, that is Bhagavan Brahma, your child. So the one who loves you only, you feel they're dearer than your brother, your wife, and your child. What awesome poetry. And you have come before my eyes to validate your teaching. You have come before my eyes to validate your teaching. Okay, so this is the translation. Now, what has happened? In Mithila, this great city, there are two great bhaktas that are living there and are wanting to see Bhagavan Krishna. One's name is Bahulashwa. He is the king of Mithila. And the second is Shrutadeva. He is a Brahmana or a teacher in Mithila. So you have the king and you have a teacher. And they both have been yearning to see Bhagavan Krishna. So Bhagavan Krishna, with a group of rishis, comes to Mithila. And when he arrives there, they both share, come to my home. And Bhagavan Krishna says yes to both of them. How is it possible? Because when they invited him, they both wanted Bhagavan to come to their home first. So Bhagavan is Bhagavan. He duplicated himself. So Bhagavan and party went to Bahulashwa's home, palace, and Shrutadeva's home simultaneously. And they each served Bhagavan in their own way. Bahulashwa was massaging Bhagavan's feet and sharing lots of luxuries. Shrutadeva had very little. So like Bahulashwa had people sing and dance for Bhagavan Krishna. Shrutadeva himself was dancing for Bhagavan Krishna because there was no one there to do it, so he was doing it. You have to imagine the simple teacher tying something around his head and tying something around his waist. And Bhagavan Krishna was most pleased. He stayed with Bahulashwa for 1 month. He stayed with Shrutadeva for 1 day, yet both of them felt like Bhagavan Krishna was with them for only 1 day. Now, the practical aspect of this is someone who has more resources can facilitate a longer stay, correct? So that's the practical aspect. Someone with less can't facilitate that. But here's the implication. For Bhagavan, he accepted all that came to him as prasad. If you get a lot in life, like a month with Bhagavan, be grateful. If you get less in life, like a day with Bhagavan, be grateful. That's what the teaching of prasada is. Like, we're thinking, why this random incident in Bhagavatam? To teach us in this very kata way. Sometimes you get lots, sometimes you get a little bit. Yes. Both should be felt equally, that I'm cheerful. And this chapter ends with such a lovely 2 words, and I did read this too earlier. I'm reading it again. Bhagavan Bhakta Bhaktiman, which means Bhagavan is devoted to his bhakta. We're always taught the other way around. Bhaktas are devoted to Bhagavan, but in this narration, the implication is that Bhagavan is as devoted to his bhaktas. We reviewed chapter 84, we reviewed chapter 85. These are most practical chapters. And chapter 86 we've reviewed and completed. It's very interesting. We continue. This morning, we will complete 110 hours of Vedanta and Bhagavata. Most of us, when it comes to Bhagavata, we think of a Bhagavata Saptaha, which means in a week, Bhagavatam is summarized. My trajectory, and I feel this will work, is that we will complete Bhagavatam in 168 hours. So that's not a summary. Instead of experiencing this over a week, we're going to experience this with a week of hours. So that means we have around 58 more hours in classes to flow through, which makes the completion the end of 2023. As I've been sharing with you, my primary guidance is coming from Pujya Swami Tejomayananda's discourses in 1989 in English. These discourses were him facilitating a class like we're experiencing. My secondary guidance is coming from the book you have. That is Pujya Swami Tejomayananda's Bhagavata Sapta in Hindi, which was in 1992, and that has been summarized for you, the book that you're typically using with the turquoise cover. A class and a retreat are incomparable. Experiencing Bhagavatam through a class versus experiencing this through a week is incomparable. We have been taught as students, as those who are sharing thoughts on Vedanta, to not have favorites in your seva, in your sadhana. Like with those I serve with, I don't like one of you more and one of you less. In terms of sadhana, that every skanda of Bhagavatam is equal. They're all beautiful. But it's hard to stop yourself from having favorites, especially in terms of sadhana. For Pujya Swami Tejomayananda, his favorite part of Bhagavatam, which we've already flowed through, is when Vritra Asura is speaking to Indra Sura. This was in the 6th skanda. I'm sharing all of this with you because chapter 87 of the 10th section is my favorite chapter of the entire Bhagavatam. We're told not to have favorites, but it's hard to help from having favorites. And I was sharing about the incomparability between a class and a retreat. In your books, chapter 87 is given 3 lines. That's it. I'm going to slowly flow through chapter 87, I'm going to share this simply. Try to be more reflective than you are. You can write if you want. You can close your eyes if you want. And I think it's magical that today we have our silence workshop. We had our retreat last week. We have our workshop this week. And this chapter has magically manifested itself for us. It is very reflective. What else is magical is I had planned to complete chapter 87 and 88 this week, but Bhagavan laughed. His yoga Maya keeps coming into my plans. Here's the orientation to this chapter. Rishi, Raja Parikshita, asks Rishi Shuka that the Veda is finite. It is made up of words. Then how can the Veda lead one to the infinite? This is the question he asks. Rishi Shuka responds. Chapter 87, this is verse 3. 87:3. Saisha hyap Upanishad Brahmi Purvesham Purva Jayadhrita Shraddhaya Dharayet Yastam Kshemam Gaccheta Kinchanaha. He shares. Most definitely, the Upanishad leads one to Brahma. Brahma here means infinity. Purvesham, Purva Jayadhrita, our guides and their guides have both meditated and experienced this. So, how should we be? Shraddhaya. Have faith. Dharayet yastam, and you should meditate on this also. Kshemam gachet akinchana. When this becomes your focus, kshemam gachet, you will experience the greatest. This verse then leads to Rishi Shuka telling Raja Parikshita that your question is not original. This question was asked before. Who asked this? Rishi Narada was once wandering around the world, and he came to Rishi Narayana. I'm not saying Bhagavan Narayana, I'm saying Rishi Narayana. If you remember the list of avatars, Rishi Narayana are included in that. Rishi Narayana is a sadhu who's ever engaged in tapa. Tapa means he is practicing disciplines, but what is so beautifully shared, he doesn't need it. He is doing this to bless those who are living in Bharatavarsha. Imagine how dedicated he is to those in Bharatavarsha, how much sacrifice he's making, and he doesn't even know the people in Bharatavarsha. Now, some of you are living in Bharatavarsha, so this is happening. Rishi Narayana, they are Chiranjeevi, which means they will not die like I will. Now, some of us, we weren't born in Bharatavarsha. I wasn't born in Bharatavarsha, but our roots are. Agreed? My tree root is just farther. It's spanned many time zones. It's just a longer route. Rishi Narayana tells Rishi Narada. Rishi Narada has asked Rishi Narayana the same question about why the Veda. And Rishi Narayana says, your question also is not original. This question was asked before. And he gives some context here. There is a loka called Janaloka. In Janaloka, a Brahma Satra was happening. A satra is a long engagement, almost like our class. And the focus is on Brahma. So a Brahma satra is happening. And one of the most prominent thinkers there was Rishi Sanandana. And this question was asked to him. You're following these dialogues. And why I'm sharing this with you, because Rishi Shuka's answer to Raja Parikshita is, our guides meditated upon this, their guides meditated upon this. See how authoritative what is being shared is. So Rishi Sanandana shares an example. When a king is sleeping, how is she or he awoken? An iPhone, a trumpet. Poets come into his room and sing the royalty's praises. Don't you wish you were a queen or a king? Someone came into the room and said, your hair is so beautiful. How you lived yesterday was amazing. I would love to wake up to that and said, Vyasa coming to my room at 5 a.m., change the vacuum batteries. That happened, factually. In the same way, at the end of a kalpa, which means a period of creation and destruction, Bhagavan Narayana is sleeping. And the Veda praises Bhagavan Narayana so that he wakes up. And creation can happen. In this chapter, verses 14 to 41, inclusive, so including 14 and 41, these are 28 verses where the Veda is speaking. The word Shruti is used. It is the Veda that is speaking about Bhagavan Narayana or Bhagavan Krishna. Many of you are in our Upanishad course. Our Upanishads sometimes are too coded. And if it's too coded, you can't reflect on it. Many of you are in Meaningful Mornings. Bhagavad Gita at times is too directed. And that which is too directed, you can't reflect upon also. So if it's too coded, I can't reflect on it. If it's too directed, there's no need for reflection. These verses are perfect for reflection. Reflection helps us to release what we are not, to feel who we are. I am going to flow through 14 of the 28 verses. I will speak about this slowly and simply. Please reflect with your eyes open or your eyes closed. Verse 15, the Veda shares about Bhagavan. You are the unaffected one. Unlike clay, when it's made into a pot, is affected. A form is given, a name is given. You are unaffected. And that means for us, as we reflect upon this, all of the forms and names that we're interacting with are Bhagavan. They were, they are, they will be. In the same verse, the Veda only teaches about Bhagavan. All of the other names that are mentioned, like Indra and Vayu, those are really expressions of you Just like when one places an item onto a table, we think that table is holding that item, but finally it's the earth that is holding all. The earth is holding the table that is holding that entity. The Veda only teaches Bhagavan. Verse 16. Sadhus know all is you, and they also know that people don't know you. So they have documented how you've expressed yourself as avatars. And they have done this to save people who do not know you. This is a way for them to come to know you. In the same verse, those who love you are alive, and those who don't are just a pair of bellows. The implication meaning they're just lungs. They're just breathing. Those who love you are alive. Those who don't love you, they're mechanically living. In the same verse, you are life. You have enlivened Maya, which enlivens the gunas. All of the articles, being, circumstances, all of this is guna. That is enlivened by Maya. Maya is enlivened by life. So our roots are life, not A, B's, and C's, not forgetfulness. In the 21st verse, the Paramahamsas, those who have complete clarity about what is important and not important, they reject apavarga. Apavarga means reject moksha, because they're tuned into the fifth purushartha, which is bhakti. Many of you sometimes ask, where is the reference that the fifth purpose in life is bhakti? That is shared here. Bhakti is prema seva. It is one feeling loved, so they love others in the form of service. That's what they're dedicated to. In verse 22, the body we are given is perfectly designed to serve like a close friend does to us. A close friend is someone who's always helping us physically, emotionally. This body is the same way. Perfectly designed for us to serve our best friend. Verse 23. The Shruti, the gopis, and Adi. Adi here means Adi Shesha, Shri Balarama, are all equivalent to those who intensely think about you and so receive your grace. Anyone who's intensely thinking about Bhagavan receives that kripa. They're equal to the Veda, the gopis, and we learn so much about, in fact, Shri Balarama. The 27th verse. Those who love Bhagavan, they use death as a step. They step on the head of death as they evolve. For those who love Bhagavan. Those who do not love Bhagavan are bound to samsara like an animal. And the rope that they're bound with is rituals. They are unable to free themselves of those rituals. Verse 31. Bhagavan is like water, and a jiva is like a tiny pocket of air. In other words, a bubble. So we're all in Bhagavan, but feel that we're separate. And what should we do? We should pull all of that air out of that ego. And what will happen? We'll re-merge with Bhagavan. Verse 32. Bhagavan has a wheel. The rim of this wheel is the past, present, and future. And it just keeps on spinning. That's the rim. And the spokes of this wheel is samsara. And this is what we experience. Regrets of the past, anxiety of the future. That's what samsara is. But not the center. The center of that wheel does not spin. That is Atman. Verse 33. Without a guru, all of one's efforts will fail and one will feel sorrow. Like a group of merchants on a boat in an ocean. They have stuff, they have a boat, but they're in the ocean and they don't know how to reach land. Verse 40. Bhagavan is independent joy. And that is felt in one's heart only through a parampara, a tradition. One who feels that joy in their heart is able to guide another to feel that joy in their heart. The Bhagavan is embedded in this parampara. Verse 41. Even the finite is too great to describe. Leave alone the infinite. So what the Veda does is uses the teaching technique of neti. Na iti. Instead of getting lost in the greatness of the finite, this is still finite. And by knowing not this, one comes to rediscover infinity. This dialogue that Rishi Sanandana is sharing with all at this Brahma Satra in Janaloka. This is being shared by Rishi Narayana to Rishi Narada. And one of the final sharings that Rishi Narayana shares with Rishi Narada. This is in verse 50. This is what I want us to keep from all that I've shared from the slow and simple reflections I shared with you. Tam. Tam means you. Kaivalya will experience independent joy. Nirasta yonim. One will be freed from being born again. Abhayam. One will experience fearlessness, which is oneness. How? Dhyayet. Meditate. Ajasram. Ajasram means perpetually. On who? Harim. On Bhagavan. Tam kaivalya nirasta yonim abhayam dhyayet ajasram harim. Connecting this back to Raja Parikshita. Rishi Narayana shares the answers about What is the role the Veda plays in leading to enlightenment? Rishi Narayana taught this to Rishi Narada. Rishi Narada then goes to Rishi Vyasa and teaches him. And Rishi Vyasa taught Rishi Shuka. Rishi Shuka is now taught Raja Parikshita. And us, we get to be part of all of this too. So what are we going to do? Dhyayet ajasram harim. We will perpetually reflect on Bhagavan. Oh.